Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Why is justice beneficial to you? Why is it a good thing? We don't talk about justice so much in our society. What do we say instead? When we get in debates, right and wrong, right? You should do the right thing. Why should you do the right thing? Where do we learn about that sort of stuff? Who's the first people that we learn about right and wrong from? Yeah, hopefully, right? Well, I mean, even if we learn the wrong stuff, we're learning it from our parents early on. And if we don't have parents, then it's aunts, uncles, grandparents, whoever's raising us, the person at the orphanage, somebody is actually nurturing us, raising us, telling us things to do. Who else? Who else is very important early on?
Teachers?
Yeah. Now, this is not something that Adamantis talks about, in part because the Greeks, where most of the schooling happened at home, right? They didn't have public school systems at that time. It was mostly at home, and then later on, as your kids got older, you'd hire a tutor or you'd send them to a school or something like that. But this would apply. Where else do people get their ideas of right and wrong from? Fairly early on, yeah.
Oh, early on? I was just going to say like media, possibly.
Well, I think that happens very early on, actually, in our society. In part because of the TV. Kids' cartoons. If you pay attention to kids' cartoons, there's moral messages in them. That's why every once in a while parents get upset about this cartoon or that cartoon. Here's a great example. None of you have kids right now, right? When you have kids, would you let your kid watch Family Guy when they're 5? You would? Really? I wouldn't. I have kids. I don't let mine. I like watching Family Guy. I like watching, American Dad and Archer and a lot of these, adult cartoons. And they're not adult because there's a lot of nudity or anything like that. They're adult because there's people behaving very badly, and there's not the sort of, wrap it all up at the end, good triumphs over evil kind of theme to it, is there? I don't want my kids to learn how to swear too early as well. They're going to learn sooner or later. So I hope that's another reason I wouldn't let them watch Family Guy. There's a whole bunch of things. So media is important. Are there any other sources that we get our ideas of right and wrong from? Yeah, religion. And I suppose there could be some other things that would fall into that. Like there's certain atheist movements, like ethical culture, where they're very into talking about right and wrong, and that they treat it very much like a religious person would. It's sort of a faith commitment. I suppose if you're in a communist society, where religion is, the opiate of the masses is banned, it would be a religion of the state, Mao, it's kind of funny. One of the things that China has had to crack down on in recent years, Mao, who was, one of the great leaders, and also a horrible person, but a really strong guy. A lot of taxi drivers have like images of Chairman Mao in their taxis. Sort of like people have St. Christopher medals over here. They think it's going to ward off, accidents and things like that, because his power is sort of attached. That's a religious conviction, and they actually are trying to stamp it out in China. This is probably a pretty good list. This is probably fairly comprehensive. There's other sources by which we learn about good and bad, right and wrong. Now, Adamantis says, let's look at what people actually say. Do they say that justice, being a good person, being a just person, following the rules, not screwing anybody over, you know, respecting other people's rights, giving people what they deserve, even when you don't have to, do they say that's a good thing for you to have, virtue is its own reward, or do they try to sweeten the deal? When you asked your parents, why do I have to do the right thing? What did they answer you? Did they say, because it is the right thing? You're obviously misunderstanding the question. You know, if you were a good deontologist, you'd realize that right is its own concept, and you ought to be doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Probably not, right? What did they say? Yeah, they draw comparisons. Don't be like those guys over there. But why not be doing that? Yeah, I mean, those other kids seem to be having a good time.
It makes you feel good. Makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah, sometimes they say, yeah, doing the right thing will make you feel good. But usually when you actually ask, why do I have to do the right thing, it's because you know doing the right thing isn't going to make you feel good. You got to give something up that you want. Yeah.
Well, it does benefit the parents in terms of like the parents are able to boast about their own children to other parents who may not be as lucky as.
Yeah, look at my kid. Yeah. So that's good.
Bragging rights.
Like how you want others to treat you back.
Oh, reciprocity. Yeah. Now he doesn't talk so much about that, but that's a good consideration. He talks about something more like reputation, you know, or you know, social. What do we call it? The way you look to other people, being held in social esteem. That's a good kid. Good kid, just. They get a reputation for being a good kid. And then what happens to good kids? They get hit?
So they don't get it.
They don't. Yeah, there's the. He doesn't talk that much about the punishment thing. You get the idea that Adamantus is coming from a house where they don't do a lot of striking. That may not be the case for all of us. I know I had a good mix of the two. I'll tell you, I grew up on a street where there were very, very few parents that didn't do any sort of spanking or things like that. There were kids who were spanked, and then there were kids who were beaten, and you knew the difference back then. There were certain ways of sort of discerning, you know, and you know, beating clearly, crossing some sort of lines, not good. Spanking, who knows? You know, that's the sort of neither here nor there. There is so there could be a negative thing here, but what he lays out is something positive. Be a good person because that's going to lead to reputation. That's going to lead to rewards. What is it you're actually after then? What are you valuing? The rewards, and maybe the reputation. The reputation is one of these goods that's both instrumental and intrinsic. This is the intrinsic good. This is what you really want. Justice is just an instrumental good. It's just good for getting you the stuff that you want. Now, if you're telling kids stuff like that, what's the message the kids are learning? Yeah.
Like me, like what rewards am I going to get for myself?
Yeah, it could reinforce the natural egoism of them. But it's also telling them something about how they ought to value these, how an intelligent person, a person who isn't, you know, outside of the norms of their society, ought to put things in the balance. So if you could get the rewards without being just, if justice is going to cost you some stuff, get rid of justice, right? It's only good because it leads to this stuff. Adamantus is pointing out something that does happen in a lot of cases. He says as well, if you think about the poets, and when he's talking about the poets, he really means what at that time was the media and also to a certain extent the religious leaders. What do the poets say? They, instead of saying social reputation, which they also talk about, insofar as they're talking about religion, justice will lead to the favor of the gods, and the gods then will give you blessings. And what do those blessings consist in? Things you like. Things other people like. Great, you know, herd of cattle. Probably not a blessing that you can relate to, you know, but for a 6th century, you know, rural Greek person, that was a big thing. What would be the sort of blessings? There are a lot of people who talk, you know, along these lines today. Be good, so that God's going to like you, and God will shower you with blessings. What are the kind of blessings that we tend to like? Money, prosperity. What else? Good mate, you know. health, lots of possessions, opportunities. Am I missing anything? What's that?
It's a protection.
Protection, security, yeah. The horrible deaths of your enemies. No, we don't usually go for that. And some people might go for that as well. But you see the idea. Once again, being in good graces with the gods or God, that's a good thing. It's really a good thing mainly because it leads to blessings. And why should you be just? So God will like you. God doesn't like unjust people. God will get them in some way. What happens in this case again? Well, justice is just an instrumental good. So you're telling the kids, hey, if you could do without the justice part, if the gods happen to like you already, don't worry about being just. Don't try to cultivate a sense of justice. Just take what you're getting. The other thing that he has that some of the religious leaders are actually saying, they go to the rich people and they say, hey, you've done a lot of bad stuff, but if you use your wealth and put on games, this is where some of the games in Greece and Rome came from, games, festivals, that sort of stuff. Those were religious festivals. Those were to please the gods. If you do this public service, then the gods are going to like you again. And when you die, you're not going to go to the bad place, you're going to go to the good place. And forget where your money came from. It's what you do now that matters. It's what you do with your opportunities now. Forget that you screwed over a whole bunch of people in making that money. You can take that money and make it do something good, and then things will turn out well for you. Now, if kids hear stuff like that, what's the message they're getting?
That they could get away with anything.
So long as they make enough money.
Make up for it later.
Exactly. That it doesn't really matter how unjust you've been. It's where you're going. Don't we say stuff like that? It's not where you've been. It's not who you were. It's who you are right now. Well, a lot of people think who you were before actually matters a bit. Somebody wants you to invest some money with them, and they say, yeah, I screwed my investors over before, but that was the old me. Would you trust them with your money? I sure wouldn't. Bernie Madoff came out of prison, which he's not going to do. He said, this time I'm going to do it right. And if you contribute, it's also going to go to charity. It's going to help these orphans over here. You still shouldn't invest in Bernie Madoff. He's not a person. So all these people are giving messages that justice is really not valuable. It's only valuable because it gives you things that you want. It's instrumentally good. That's a big problem. Now, let me ask you this, and this will be the last thing that we'll talk about with respect to this topic. Do you think, thinking about ancient Greek society, a little bit of it that you've got with this Plato discussion, and our society, do you think that kids are getting a better understanding overall about justice? Not what justice necessarily is, but why it would be good to be just? Or do you think we're getting a worse one? We're giving our kids a worse idea? Or do you say it's about the same? What do you think? I'm interested in your thoughts. I know what I think about it. But you guys have a different vantage point than I do. You guys are actually a lot newer. You're closer to it. Did you get any screwed up ideas about, yeah?
I mean, through the media, the world is definitely smaller, so children know more of the horrors of the world.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Through that, maybe we'll know more justice.
Okay. So they can see the consequences of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
That could actually be a good thing, yeah.
But I feel like the basic fundamentals of justice really haven't changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does, as long as humans have been on the earth, they kind of have this sense of morality and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it really doesn't matter. But the media is definitely huge.
Yeah, it really pervades our lives in ways. I mean, all you got to do is pick up your cell phone and you've got instant access to all these different things. So, yeah, maybe in certain respects it's different. Oh, you were going to... Oh, you're just stretching? Okay. Maybe in certain respects it's tougher, in other respects it's easier. I don't know. The media itself is kind of a double-edged sword, because if you want to get some good message out, it's easy to do. If you want to get some bad message out, it's also easy to do. Easier than it was in ancient Greek times, right? Where you had to like hire somebody to shout it, or write it down and hope some, your poem would catch on, or, something like that.